The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Gotta say, this is a pretty cool job, hosting The Best in the World with Richard Parr, getting the opportunity to speak to Olympic and world champions to find out what they do differently from the rest of us to become the very best in their sport. It's really, really good, and I'm pumped for another episode this week, and we're with another rower. We've had a few rowers on the program before, and once again there are some fantastic knowledge bombs. Yes, we get some amazing insight from the world champion rower Annie Vernon. Yes, Annie is a two-time world champion and an Olympic silver medalist. We talk about her disappointment at the Beijing Olympics in 2008. We talk about the difference between a two-person boat and a team of 8 and how that relationship can differ in those different boats. We talk about the difficulty of retiring and what is next for a sports person or an athlete once they decide to give up on their sport. Annie, of course, retired back after the 2012 Olympics, and we discuss her diet. We also discuss the importance of Henley Royal Regatta, and Annie calls it one of the most incredible sporting events in the country. It's a really fun chat with Annie. It's all coming up on The Best in the World in just a moment. Before we get there, I want to tell you about Sportacino. Sportacino is the sports chat show that I host every single weekday at sportacino.com. Each day has a different theme. On a Monday, we review the big sports action at the weekend. On a Tuesday, we look at health and fitness and nutrition. On a Wednesday, we talk WWE wrestling and everything to do with the world of wrestling. On a Thursday, we're looking at the sports business industry. And on a Friday, we look ahead to another fantastic weekend of sports. So that is all on sportacino.com. If you think it's up your alley, go and check it out. Also like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Sportacino. Now, on that show, I get to interview top people every single week, but they don't go much better than the guests we have here on The Best in the World with Richard Parr. And I'm delighted to say coming up next is the world champion rower, Annie Vernon.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Annie Vernon, two-time rowing world champion, Olympic silver medalist. Welcome to The Best in the World with Richard Parr. So glad to have you on the show. Let's start with what you're up to now. Of course, you retired 4 years ago. Why don't you get people up to date of what you've been up to since then?
So since I retired, I clearly, like most athletes, spent a lot of time catching up on my socialising straight away. So all those years of not going out and not seeing your friends had to be rectified. So I spent a good 3 months kind of ruining my body straight after the Olympics. Since then, I spent a bit of time as a rowing coach, and then I've set up my own career doing a bit of sports journalism, a bit of corporate speaking, and I work for a couple of charities doing kind of youth work and sport. And I've just been given a contract to write a book. That's my current project.
Oh, fantastic. We'll talk about the book a little bit more later in the show, but so many different things there. Do you have a favourite, one of those things that you're up to?
I suppose that's one of the things that it's the hardest to adjust to, because when you're doing sport for your living, and particularly these days that everyone's professional and lottery funded and full time, is you really do just have one goal in your life. So everything you're doing, every little decision you make every day is defined in terms of that goal. Is this going to make me a better rower? Is this going to make me give me a better chance of winning the Olympic Games? Whereas when you retire, suddenly there's loads of different goals and you have lots of different objectives in life. So I suppose for me, juggling my kind of three strand career, it's quite challenging, but at the same time, I really like it because it's such a difference to what I was doing before.
Yeah, I was wondering if that might be frustrating at times because, getting pulled in 3 different ways.
I suppose it means I'm master of my own destiny to an extent, so I can do more of the things I like and do less of the things I don't like as much.
You mentioned you kind of enjoyed the good times after you retired. How difficult was that change from being an Olympic star to what some would say a normal person?
I think it challenges you in lots of different ways. And I suppose I went to 2 Olympic Games. I was lucky enough to go to the Beijing Olympics as well as the London Olympics. And I found that period after Beijing just absolutely awful. At that point, I didn't know if I wanted to carry on or not. But I really felt like the world had been turned upside down, and I didn't know which way was up and I didn't know which way was down. So I think going into London, I knew that not only it was going to be my last games, that I'd definitely retire, but also I knew that I had to plan for that post-Olympic period. I didn't want to be in the same hole I was after Beijing. So I planned loads of different social activities. I went on a few holidays. I organised a huge rowing event in Cornwall, which is where I'm from, about a month after the games, which took up virtually all of my time between the Olympics and the event. I planned loads of work experience. I had coffees with hundreds of different people to talk about various career options. So I think it wasn't really until Christmas that all of that ran out. And by that point, I was a bit more ready to take the next step. But I suppose the thing about retiring from elite sport is it really does change you in every possible way. I mean, everybody who's done a demanding job will know that change is difficult. But I think when you've done sport, it's a physical activity. So once you stop doing that, you're not training every day. So, your appetite changes, your need for sleep changes, your body shape changes a lot. How you feel after doing exercise, you don't have that anymore. So not only does your conception of yourself and your identity change, but in quite a physical way every single day, your lifestyle is completely different. I went from needing to sleep about 10 hours out of every 24 to a normal amount, 7 or 8 hours a night. I went from needing to eat 5,000 calories a day to what is a normal amount of 2,000 a day. So suddenly everything changes, and it does take a lot of adjusting to. But like I said, I was really well supported by the British rowing team through that period, and having had quite a low time after my first Olympics, I set myself up for a bit more proactively for my second experience.
There's a few things we want to go into a bit more detail there, because there's so much good information there to help us become the best in the world. But let's just explain to some of our listeners who don't know actually why you were so disappointed in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. It was a silver medal. Now, a lot of people would say that, oh wow, it's a silver medal, it's incredible. But why don't you just explain what happened and just how you felt when you got silver and missed out on the gold?
It was hugely disappointing. I mean, of course, from the outside, any Olympic medal, any Olympic performance, being an Olympian is unbelievable, and it's a privilege that should never be taken for granted. And as if somebody had said to my 15-year-old self, one day, not only will you go to the Olympics, but you'll stand on the podium. I mean, goodness, I would have laughed in their face and would have grabbed it with both hands. But as an athlete, you're there to do a job. We went into that Olympic Games as the reigning world champions. We wanted to win. We'd set our sights on winning. We'd trained for 4 years with the intention of being good enough to win. And we were good enough to win, but we didn't row well on the day. We didn't have our best performance. And quite rightly, we were beaten by a better crew. So I think, of course, as time goes on, I'm incredibly proud of the fact that I'm an Olympic medalist. But purely as an athlete, as someone who's there to do a job and is a professional and highly trained and highly skilled in that job, as far as I'm concerned, we let ourselves down and we should have been faster. But, as time goes on, I feel, less and less annoyed about it and more just proud of the good times that I did have.
When you reflected and analysed on the performance, when you said it was a bad day, was there anything in particular you pinpointed which went wrong?
I don't think there's one thing. I mean, as anyone who has done sport or anybody who's done anything demanding will know, if you win a race, it doesn't mean you did everything right. If you lose a race, it doesn't mean that you did everything wrong. And reflecting, we did a huge amount right, and I think we would have beaten most crews, but the crew that beat us clearly pulled something quite special out of the bag in the last section of the race. And I mean, clearly you could pick it apart with a fine tooth comb, but I think in broad brushstrokes, to be honest, we just let the pressure get to us. We let the pressure of wanting to win, being so passionate about winning that gold, that became too much of a driving motivation. And I think we lost our sense of perspective and we didn't deal with that expectation. And it was all internal expectation. It's not like anyone in the outside world cared what we were doing. But I guess you could say that we wanted it too much, and that clouded our judgment.
Was there any overconfidence because you were the world champions at the time?
Oh, definitely not. I think quite the reverse. I think we probably should have been a bit more confident because everything was going well. We had a great year. And I think, again, possibly we had too good a year, had something big gone wrong. It focuses the mind. It brings everyone together. It means you have to strip everything back to the essentials again. And perhaps we would have gone a bit better had we had a major setback. But as it was, the year went really well. And I think perhaps we didn't sit back and allow ourselves to be confident. We were still feeling like we were chasing something and trying to find something, which, with hindsight, we already had that thing. We were good enough, but we didn't quite believe it.
So let's take a look at that year which went so well and that period. What was a typical training day like?
So the basis of rowing is that it is a power and endurance sport. And the bread and butter of your training is very much that you were training those two parts of it. You're training your power and you're training your endurance. So you're doing perhaps 2 endurance sessions a day. So for us, that is between an hour and a half to 2 hours, either rowing on the water or on the rowing machines. And backing that up, we'd be in the gym every other day or sometimes every day doing lifting weights, so increasing our power and also working our conditioning. So looking at our robustness, our core stability, our trunk strength, all of those little things that meant we could set ourselves up to go out and train even harder. So normally we'd start training we'd normally meet at about 7:30 in the morning. First session would normally just be steady state, low intensity, I guess a similar intensity to jogging, rowing on the water, rain, shine, wind, snow, sleet, whatever it was, we'd be out there. Second session would perhaps be 11 till 1, something like that. Would normally be on the ergos, on the rowing machines. And then have a bit of lunch, have a bit of downtime, perhaps have a snooze. Third session, 4 to 6 in the evenings in the gym, lifting weights and doing all that conditioning as well. So I'd normally leave my house at about 7 o'clock and get home again at about 7 o'clock in the evenings, completely exhausted, having eaten about 5 meals.
Yeah, so let's speak about those 5 meals. What were they typically?
I think if I could sum up my nutrition as an athlete in one word, it would be cereal. So I used to eat a huge amount of breakfast cereal all day. We normally have 2 breakfasts. So, a big bowl of cereal before you did your first session, big bowl of cereal after you did your first session, or porridge. When we're training, we're drinking isotonic fluid, perhaps eating an energy bar if things are getting tough. Big lunch, sometimes with a dessert, all just standard normal food, but quite a lot of it. Perhaps a mid-afternoon snack before we went and did weights, something a bit more proteiny, and then a snack straight away after weights to assist with our recovery, and then a decent dinner in the evening.
And was this all prepped for you? Was this all planned ahead of time?
No, not really. I mean, I'd like to say that it was, but when you're training that hard and you're eating those many calories, if you tried to eat 5,000 calories of healthy food every day, it would be near impossible. Your stomach would be full all day. So a lot of that food, it is perhaps higher fat, higher sugar content, because you need the energy and you just need to get the calories in. And like I said, if you try to eat 5,000 calories of just fruit and vegetables all day, your stomach would be bloated and it would be pretty uncomfortable. So yeah, a lot of it was, well, I'm not going to say unhealthy, but a lot of it was, higher fat, higher sugar content. But you're training so hard, that's what you need to eat.
Yeah, in a weird way, once you've finished competing after 2 Olympic cycles, we're in 2012, 2013 now, and you've had this same routine every single day of 5 meals a day, 5,000 calories. What goes on in your mind those few weeks afterwards? Do you think, I should be eating now? Oh no, actually I shouldn't because I'm going to put on so much weight. Like, how does that work? Or do you just go, actually I just don't need to do this anymore?
I think everyone struggles, and certainly if you meet up with people 6 to 12 months after they've retired, you can see the ones who have struggled to stop eating. For me, I didn't enjoy the constant eating that much. I used to struggle with it a bit. So I liked the fact that I could then cut down my calories, and because you've got to remember the reason you're eating so much is because you're so damn hungry, because you're training so hard. Once you stop training, you become less hungry. You don't need to eat as much. So I didn't find it that difficult, but I think from the size of some people, they do. They do.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
More great knowledge from Annie in just a moment, but I want to tell you that today's show is also brought to you by Audible. Audible is one of the leading suppliers of audiobooks in the world. 180,000 titles for you to choose from to download for free with a free trial at audibletrial.com/best. Yes, you get a 30-day free trial with one free download. audibletrial.com/best. Go and check it out. It's a product I personally use and I really think you would benefit from using it too. audibletrial.com/best. Free audiobook download and 30-day free trial. All right, let's return to more great knowledge from the world champion rower. Annie Vernon is on the program.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
And how close were you to the other members of your team, and were you always close together? And how important was that for you to be successful, to become world champions?
I think every sports team will probably give you a different answer to that, and every rowing team will give you a different answer to that. And particularly, I think men's teams and women's teams will give you a different answer. When things are going well, it's easy to be friends. It's easy to have a joke and a laugh and all get on. When things are going badly, that then challenges those bonds. And so I guess the answer is you need to have a healthy relationship where you get on and you collaborate and you cooperate. But at the same time, it's a challenging cooperation, a challenging collaboration. So you can speak to each other in a challenging way and have difficult conversations in order to push each other on. You know, the last thing you want to do is let something go under the carpet or think, oh, okay, I won't make a fuss about this. I think we're not moving on in this area, but I won't make a fuss because I don't want to upset my friends. You need to be completely honest with each other. And sometimes, it can be easier to have those honest conversations with people you don't necessarily get on with because you don't care what they think of you. Whereas if they're your best friends, you do care what they think of you. So I suppose the answer is I was, like anything in life, I was very good friends with some of my teammates, not so good friends with others of my teammates, some of which I've stayed in contact with, some of which I haven't spoken to since. But the most important thing is that I can have an honest conversation and be open with all of my teammates, whether I like them or not. Mm-hmm. So the way I saw it was, if we're friends in 10 years' time, that's a bonus, but we're not here to be friends. We're here to get the job done and win the race.
Yeah, and effectively you're all going for the same goal. Now, obviously the goal for every 4-year cycle is normally to get the gold medal. Would you as a team sit down and set smaller goals?
Yes. So in rowing, you only race a few times a year. So you have a few races in the summer. So, of course, you'd aim to do well in all of those races. But throughout the winter, there's constant testing, trials, big sessions that matter a lot, rankings. So there'd always be something around the corner that you had to focus on. And of course, absolutely, we'd break that down and I'd think about where I wanted to finish at the winter trials, where I wanted to finish in the spring trials. Rowing's also a sport where a lot of it takes place in the rowing machine. So you can very much set your standard and say, right, on this ergo session, I want to pull this score. I want to do this score on this test. So you can monitor your physical progress in the rowing machines really, really easily. I mean, anyone in the world who's used a Concept 2 will know they're all the same. And the numbers you see don't lie. You can't hide. So you'd be monitoring your physical progress on the row machines and also in the gym. And then in terms of on the water stuff, of course, you'd be setting pretty clear goals as to where you needed to finish.
I wish those numbers on that rowing machine would lie sometimes for me. So we spoke about kind of your training routine and everything like that. What about on days of competition? Did you have any particular routines, any rituals, anything like that?
Not really as such. I mean, no rituals, certainly, because I guess you start to think, well, when does a ritual become a superstition? And when does a ritual become a problem? If, for example, I can't do the thing I always do, if for whatever reason, there's no access to that facility, or if I don't have time to do it, or if the weather's awful, is that going to completely throw me off? So I guess I just wanted to make sure that I knew what headspace I needed to be in. I knew how I needed to feel mentally. I knew what was okay to feel physically. And I just tried to be pretty relaxed and work myself into that headspace. But also, rowing is such a intense team sport that you'd perhaps only be using 50% of your attention on yourself, and 50% of you would be looking at your teammates, thinking, right, how are they doing? How are they feeling? Do I need to talk to any of them? Are any of them looking at me and worrying? Are we all on the same page? Is everyone on time for all the things we need to arrive on time for? And all just those little things. So I would say, yeah, half of my attention was making sure that I was setting myself up to perform, and half of my attention was on making sure that my crewmates were setting themselves up to perform.
And is that something which becomes more complex when you go from being 4 people in a boat to 8 people in a boat?
Perhaps not complex, because clearly you can't have as tight a relationship. If there's just 2 of you in the boat, then you know that other person absolutely inside out. I mean, it's like a marriage. So you can sense if anything isn't quite right with them. At the same time, if they're in the zone and they're really pumped up and they're going to be incredible in that race, you can really feel that and feed off it. Whereas in a bigger boat, you can't have that intense level of relationship. So it's slightly, slightly lighter touch. So you wouldn't know them as well and be able to have that real, intuitive feel for each other, because, you'd just be exhausted. You go in the same way that, you marry one person, you don't normally marry 10 people. So I think you get better at just staying focused on the bigger picture items in an 8. So making sure that everyone is on the same page, but not necessarily trying to get right inside their head in a way you would in a small boat.
Now, we've spoken about a lot of the things you got up to when you became a professional rower, but how did you first get started in the sport, Annie?
So I guess rowing is a sport that you can't do it everywhere. You can't just go down to your local sports centre and start rowing. You have to live near a river or a canal or a lake, and you need to have a boathouse that has equipment in it. I mean, and the thing is, I know that sounds obvious, but actually that's not that common in the UK. We don't have that many rivers that you can row on. We don't have a couple of lakes, and we have hardly any canals. So you go to Europe and, they have these huge inland lakes and inland rivers, and particularly in Germany, there's huge canals, and there's just far more rowing clubs. So in the UK, yes, they are mainly concentrated in the southeast, because the Thames is one of the few bits of river that's, for most of its length, is wide enough to row on. So I was lucky enough to grow up not too far away from a river that equally was just about okay to row on, although it wasn't ideal because it was very tidal, down in South Cornwall. And then I went to university in Cambridge, where, I mean, anyone who's watched the Oxford-Cambridge boat race will know that rowing is a pretty big deal in Cambridge. I mean, I think something like 50% of the university will row at some point during their time there. And it's more like a religion than a sport. And I immediately realised that rowing was where all the fun people were, all the best parties were, and where all the tall men were. So that's where I took myself. And so I guess I started off as someone who, I enjoyed rowing, but I wasn't that passionate about it. And then when I got to Cambridge and realised what a big deal it was, suddenly I thought, yes, actually, this is a great sport, and really got my teeth into it.
Yeah, it's funny. We had Mahe Drysdale, the New Zealand rower, on the show a while ago, and he was saying he got into rowing because of the parties to begin with, and then gradually stopped drinking. You mentioned there about how we don't have as many rivers in the UK as to other parts of Europe, yet Britain in general does do very well at rowing. Would you say that is because of Cambridge and Oxford?
Historically, certainly. Yes, and that's, I guess, why it's had this, upper class reputation in the past. Because rowing it's a very expensive sport to do. I mean, a boat will cost you about the same as a car. You'll be spending anything from 500 quid up to 50 grand on a boat. So they're not cheap things to have. It's not like you can go down the park and have a kick around for free. So historically, it's been the private schools and Oxbridge that have really provided that pipeline of talent. And I suppose the other really great thing we have in the UK, which, again, I really think contributes to our success in rowing, is we have Henley Royal Regatta. Now, I know a lot of your listeners will probably think Henley Royal Regatta is just this society event where the Queen turns up every few years, everyone wears posh frocks and blazers and drinks Pimm's and champagne. But actually, strip all that away, and it's the most incredible sporting event, one of the most incredible sporting events in the country, and certainly, I would say, the greatest rowing event aside from the Olympics, because it's an event where, number one, it's one of the most prestigious rowing events in the world. So everybody wants to compete at Henley. You have to qualify to get there. So it's even just competing at Henley is a really big deal, let alone winning it. But also there's events for schoolboys, schoolgirls, lower end clubs, better clubs, rubbish universities, good universities, budding internationals, top internationals and Olympians. And they're competing at the same event. So this would be like a park where you have a Sunday league team playing alongside Manchester United, playing alongside Brazil. This is honestly what Henley Royal Regatta is like. They're sharing the same changing rooms. They're rowing on the same course. They're doing the same warm-up routine. And actually, for young people coming into our sport to even just go to Henley, let alone race there, it's such a privilege and it's such a buzz that I really think for many young people, going to Henley and boating alongside your heroes that you've seen row at the Olympics on the TV, literally, sharing a changing room with them, I think that's such a draw. And I think it provides such an excitement for young people who start rowing that I really do think it keeps more people into our sport and attracts schoolboys and schoolgirls into it. So, like I said, Henley's often written off as just this society event for posh, social event for posh people, but it really isn't. As a pure sporting event, it is an incredible thing to have in this country, and we're pretty lucky to have it. And I think it's a real reason for our success in the sport.
Yes, it must be inspiring racing alongside some of your heroes. Who were your heroes, Annie?
Well, when I was growing up, you probably remember the 90s, Britain wasn't particularly good at sport. So, we won a few medals at the Olympics, but we didn't win that many. And I grew up in Cornwall, where rugby is a really big deal. So I guess my heroes growing up were the Cornwall rugby players who competed in the County Cup every year. And these are not household names at all, but in Cornwall, Graham Dorr, John May, Phil Vickery, these are legends. And I suppose for me, someone who I really, who had a real impact on me actually was when I was a kid watching her compete at the Olympics was Sally Gunnell. Because I read somewhere that she was a farmer's daughter and I was a farmer's daughter. And I remember vividly kind of supporting her and cheering her on at the Barcelona 1992 Olympics because, we both had a similar kind of background. And she was just a farmer's daughter like me and grew up messing around their family farm. And I don't know, that had a real impact on me at the time. I remember thinking, well, she's just like me and look at her, she's at the Olympics now. And so I guess I would probably say she was my hero. But then once I started rowing and started following the British rowing team, it was certainly all those guys I'd seen compete really. So, your Redgraves, Pinsents, Ed Code, Miriam Batten, Gwyn Batten, all these amazing rowers that I'd supported.
And how proud do you feel now that you are a hero to many children and many young kids who want to be not only a rower but an Olympian and a world champion? And because I know you do quite a few talks in schools as well, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't describe. I'm not sure how many people see me as a hero. I like to think they do, but I'm not sure if they do or not. I mean, I suppose I was lucky enough to make a career out of sport, but a career out of sport it's a tough environment, and it certainly attracts a particular type of ruthless, selfish, tough cookie. So it's not something I necessarily think it's right for everyone. But I guess what I just try and say to all the young people I come across is, just make sure you're doing things for the right reasons. Figure out what you want to do in life and stick to that. And don't get swept away by everyone else. And if that's sport, that's brilliant. If it's something else, that's equally wonderful. But don't feel like you have to be on this conveyor belt of British talent.
Well, it's been absolutely inspiring talking to you today, Annie. We've definitely learned a lot. Just before you go, can you just tell us how we can continue to get your great knowledge on social media and anything else you'd like to promote, please? Yeah,
you can follow me on Twitter at Annie Vernon GB.
Done. Followed already, and I hope everyone else follows you as well. Well, Annie Vernon, thank you so much for being on The Best in the World with Richard Parr. Thank you very much.
No problem.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Wonderful to talk to Annie on the podcast. As I mentioned to her, I did do an interview with Mahe Drysdale the champion rower, Olympic champion rower. Go and listen back to that. We also had an interview with Heather Stanning. She's been on the programme. Caroline Lind has also been interviewed. Lots of great rowers. And even if you're not interested in rowing but you want to learn from other great sports stars, go back and listen to some other fantastic podcasts. For example, Matteo Taglieriol, the fencing Olympic champion. Maybe you want to listen about horse riding and equestrianism. Maybe listen to my interview with BZ Madden. Maybe you enjoy long jumping. The reigning Olympic champion Jeff Henderson has been on the programme. Maybe you're really interested in all different types of disciplines. So maybe go and listen to the decathlon Olympic champion Brian Clay. He's been on the show as well. Go back and listen to all of them. You can listen to them at acast.com/best. We're also on iTunes, and all of the latest podcasts are going now at sportacino.com. Go and check all of that out. All right, we've got another great guest for you on The Best in the World next Wednesday. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Give us a rating and review, because next Wednesday we will have another fantastic guest on the program. All right, I have been Richard Parr. You've been listening to The Best in the World. I'll speak to you again next week. Goodbye.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.